Dear children, today let's learn the lesson On the Face of It by Susan Hill. Let's learn something about the author Susan Hill. James Susan Hill is an English author of fiction and non fiction works, and her novels include The Woman in Black, The Mist of Mirror, and I Am the King of Castle, for which she received the Somerset Maugham Award in 1971, and she also won the Whitbread Novel Award in 1972 for The Bird of Night, which was also shortlisted for the Booker Prize. There are three characters in this lesson. Derry, a young boy of 14 years, he has a burnt face. Mr. Lamb, an elderly man with a disability who wears a tin made prosthetic leg, and Derry's mother. Let's go to the introduction. This is a one act play. It is about the friendship between a young boy, Derry, and an old man, Mr. Lamb. Derry has a scar on his face for which he is very upset and feels that people do not want to associate with him. So he preferred to remain aloof. He gets into the old man's garden but panics when he meets him. Mr. Lamb puts him at ease and advises him to accept life as it comes. Mr. Lamb has a more cheerful and optimistic approach to life. Also, he impresses upon Terry to live life to the fullest and avoid bitterness. He further advises him to accept life as it is. However, Derry was motivated by Mr. Lamb's attitude and spirit. Besides, when Derry tries to come out of his shell, he suffers a loss of the only person who made friends with him, that is, Mr. Lamb. To go and understand into the summary of the lesson, the play revolves around two principal characters, as was seen before: Derry, a small boy of 14 years, and Mr. Lamb, an old man. Derry has one side of his face burnt due to acid, and Mr. Lamb lost his leg in a bomb explosion during war. Derry has a very negative attitude to life, whereas Mr. Lamb is quite optimistic and has learned to accept life as it is. One day, Derry enters a garden believing that no one was there and that the house was an abandoned one. He becomes quite startled when he heard a voice talking to him. It was Mr. Lamb, who tried to comfort him and asked him not to fear anything. To this, Derry said that he was not afraid, instead, people were afraid of him due to his burnt face. They either ridiculed him or pitied him. He advises Derry to face the harsh realities of life valiantly. They enter into a conversation, and this leads to the revelation of Derry's fear, depression, and hatred about being in such a condition. But Mr. Lamb keeps on telling him to think of the positive things and quotes several instances to make Derry realize that he should come out of the shell of alienation. All this brings a positive change in Derry's attitude towards Mr. Lamb. He promises to come back after informing his mother. He asks Mr. Lamb about his life and friends and recognizes his loneliness and disappointment. He keeps up his promise and returns, only to find Mr. Lamb lying on the ground, dead. Conclusion: Mr. Lamb changes Derry's perspective on life. Though Derry finds Mr. Lamb peculiar, he found truth, sense, and inspiration in his words. A defiant and withdrawn Derry transforms to be a person who embraces life. It is a bond of physical impairment that unites Mr. Lamb and Terry. Though the difference existed in their attitudes to life at the beginning of the lesson, Terry later learns to accept his disability. Now let's understand the theme of the play. The play highlights the fact that the sense of rejection and alienation is more painful than physical impairment. The play suggests that by seeing or understanding people beyond physical appearances and connecting with others on a deeper level, one can find companionship and a sense of belonging essential to our well being. The lesson learned. At the end, Terry has learned to appreciate the value of human connection and empathy. Let's understand Lamb's inspiration on Terry. He, in fact, teaches him watching, listening, and thinking, shows him the positive side of life and the fact that life cannot be lived in fear. Terry, in turn, gets inspired. Despite his mother's protests, he returns to Mr. Lamb. He decides to live life to the fullest. Thank you.